All right, so I want to do a little showcase video on this 3D printed crate that I made. And the main reason is because I put in a lot of work on this thing and now I just want to milk the absolute shit out of it before I go and do something else. For these personal projects, I usually like to do something new or something that challenges me. So I'm making my own game and then I'm doing more 3D printed stuff like this crate right here. Now you might be wondering why this crate is called crate 2, and that is because there is a crate 1, which is this little guy here. Oh, let me get focused. Yeah. So this is a crate I did maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. I don't really remember actually. But this was kind of the first finished 3D project I've ever done, meaning I 3D printed it, I painted it, and then I put some custom water slide decals on it. And I still kind of like it. I mean, there's a lot wrong with it. For example, these little flappy things here, they come off super easily. And they also kind of just broke really quickly. So I don't know if you can see that here, but this little one broke pretty quickly. And then, oh, you can already see it, I think. But the hinge also was kind of an issue where almost immediately after I finished this thing, the hinge broke. And that is because the hinge is completely 3D printed. And due to resin warping and becoming brittle, it just breaks due to friction almost immediately after I made this thing. But there's still some stuff that I like about it. You know, I made sure to have this sort of outer shell and then this sort of interior skeleton that I thought worked quite well. And then besides that, I used these little screws that I think are normally used for watches or something like that. So I felt all of that worked pretty well. But now, a few years later, I thought, you know what, I think I can make something that's a little bit better and that fixes some of the mistakes that I made with this first grade. So for this one, I had a couple of goals that I wanted to achieve. The first one being I wanted to fix the mistakes from that first grade. So I wanted to come up with a better solution for the hinges and sort of the inner mechanics. And then the second goal was to actually have some inner mechanics. So really wanted something to happen when you open this crate. So not like the previous one where the inside is just nothing basically. I want something to sort of happen and automatically move as you open this thing. And then my third goal was to create a sort of interesting play between the outside and the inside of the crate. And I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit later. And then the last goal was I really wanted this crate to be able to open flat, but also have a handle. And that provided with some unique challenges that I'll also show in a bit. Let's talk about those opening mechanics first, because I think that's sort of like the main, attraction of this thing. So when I open this crate, you'll see that automatically things start to move and it sort of opens up completely flat with a whole new silhouette to it. And I really like how this turned out. The opening mechanics work pretty well. And we have a completely different silhouette from the closed state versus the open state, which is what I meant with that goal of creating sort of an interesting play between the closed state and the open state. So let's talk a little bit more about these opening mechanics. As I mentioned before, I really wanted to have this big silhouette change when you open the crate up. So the main thing I wanted to do was create this big central feature that you see here that sort of really shows that big change in silhouette. And just so you know, I have no idea what this thing is. Like maybe it's a loot crate or something, or a battery pack, I guess, or something nuclear. I don't know. I just thought it looked cool, And this big circular thing right here just happened to help me out a lot with the silhouette, so that's why I went for it. Now, I put in a lot of thought in thinking, what can I do to enhance the silhouette more? And that's why we have this sort of little grabby thing here that comes out at an angle, which it was actually very difficult to design for some reason to make sure that it ended up exactly there and it can't go anywhere else. And then on the front side of the crate, we have this sort of little piece that pops out here. So those three elements together, and I guess this sort of console thingy here too, really helps to make this silhouette pop, and really sets it apart from when it's closed. And the way these mechanics work is through all these little hinges you can see right here, and then we have a couple over there, and we have more of them over here. So all of these leverage against each other and sort of make sure that this thing has to go straight up. This thing can only come out at this angle, and this little grabby thing is sort of stuck in between here. So you can see that when I close this thing and then open it back up, you see that sort of these hinges here starting to pull on that centerpiece, and then that centerpiece with those little hinge thingies there starts to pull on that console piece. And then in return, that console piece sort of pushes out that front piece right here. Now it might seem like the console and this little front thingy here are on one hinge, but there's actually like, I don't know, 4 moving parts in between them that make sure that this thing actually comes out at a different angle. Why I had to do it like that, I don't know. It caused me a lot of extra work and a lot of extra headache, but that's the idea I had in my mind. So yeah, that's what it is. And then for this back thing here, this sort of grabby thing, this was actually the hardest to figure out because I really wanted it to be at this angle to again help me with that overall silhouette. I didn't want it to be stuck against this center column, and I also didn't want it to sort of fall down and sort of lay flat with this backside. And what I ended up coming up with was this sort of little thing you can see here. I don't know how to call it, but it's a thing that sort of picks up this grabby thing and then slides it over into position. So again, I'm going to close this thing. And now when I open it, it might be hard to see, but that sort of central thing I just pointed out picks up that grabby thing and sort of slides it over and keeps it there into position. Weirdly enough, that was the hardest part of this whole project to figure out, but yeah, I really wanted it to be there for some reason, and I'm glad I did it. Now, one other important feature that you might have noticed when this thing is closed is that it has a handle. And this handle is not movable. I can't push it in right now. It just stays there. And I really wanted this handle to sort of automatically move out of the way. So if I open it one more time, you actually can see that the handle automatically moves into the body and out of the way so that I can lay this thing flat. Now, luckily, since I've done that first crate, I already learned that plastic hinges or 3D printed hinges won't work well at all, right? So you can see here, this 3D printed hinge just broke off right away. It's brittle. That's because this is 3D printed in a resin. So that becomes very brittle and it'll just break, very quickly. So the way I fixed that was by incorporating these little metal pins. So let me grab a couple to show you. So these are kind of like 1 millimeter by 4 or 5 millimeter pins that I used throughout this entire crate to make sure that all the moving parts can actually move and keep moving for a little while before it breaks. Or what the hell am I talking about? Hopefully it'll never break. Hopefully this just keeps working forever. But these little pins helped a lot. I mean, so far I've had no issues opening and closing this thing, so I consider it a big improvement. Another part I put a lot of thought and work in was the painting. Now, I'm absolutely no expert in airbrushing or painting at all, and I'm not very familiar with it, to be honest, either. That other crate I showed you, this one was kind of the first painted thing I've ever done, so this is kind of the second or the third. So again, I'm no expert, but it was a lot of fun. For painting, I've just been using this simple airbrush. It's not very fancy at all, but totally got the job done. So, whatever, this is fine. As I mentioned before, I really wanted to have this big silhouette change when you open this thing up. But outside of the shapes, I thought the painting could also help a lot, and the colors and the materials that I use. So I decided to make the outside of the crate fairly light in a sort of, plastic composite look, whatever you want to call it. And then have the inside to be more dark and metallic looking. These are all like, conscious choices to make sure that we really get the difference between that inside and the outside. And then this little console thingy here and this, I don't know, also console thing. I also don't know what that is. At the front here, I did in this sort of military green color to just give a slight offset. But my main colors are sort of this gray versus this darker metal black. And then every other color is just an accent color, right? So this little bit of orange here and this little bit of red and then a little bit more green. But overall, it's those two colors that contrast each other in value. Now, in the last crate I did, I put in these little screws, right? These little, oh, come on, focus. Yeah. These little sort of watch screws. And I really like that because it gives sort of a different material. It gives a sort of shine to this thing in a certain places. So I really wanted to do that again. And I still had a couple of them laying around, so decided to use that again in this one. You can see with this console part here that it has a lot of the little screws. And my goal was to sort of make the screws make sense. So I didn't want to just place them everywhere, I wanted to place them in points where it seems like they actually make sense in a way. So you can see here, and these screws in the front and the side, they're clearly meant to hold this outer shell in place, right? And on this monitor here, the screws are meant to hold these different components in place. I also have some screws on this middle thing. These are actually meant to hold a sort of cover in place that I actually did make, but didn't end up putting in there. It's this piece right here. The problem is that when you're 3D printing in clear, the 3D parts come out very cloudy. And I tried fixing this by sanding it and adding a top coat. But like I said before, right, I'm absolutely no expert, so I just couldn't get it any better than this. And I didn't think this looked very good. Like I accidentally trapped some dust or something inside and it's still kind of rough and cloudy. So in the end, I just decided to not put it in there. And maybe that was for the best, I don't know. I kind of like this open look that it has now. One other thought was to put an LED light inside of this thing. I thought it would be super cool if this middle piece could light up, but you have no idea what kind of headache this thing gave me already. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to save that for maybe version 2.1 of this thing or for some other project, because this was enough for me as is right now. When it comes to materials, most of this is sort of this metal versus this gray plastic kind of thing, right? But there's a couple of pieces I printed in clear resin. So this piece in the middle here is printed in a clear resin that, because of the 3D printing, comes out very cloudy. I purposely left it like this because I thought it looked kind of cool. But there's a few other pieces in here that I tried to clean up and make a little bit more shiny. So as you can see here, this console has a sort of glass piece covering it, covering the screen, just for adding a little bit more material differentiation. And then when I close it back up, like this, and show the front. So the front console screen thing, whatever, also has this glass sort of material on the top. And I'm happy I did it because at first I thought, nah, I'm just going to leave that out. But I just think it helped to bring this thing come to life a little bit more. And this part was supposed to be part of that too, but couldn't make it work. So decided to leave that out. Whatever, who cares? One of the last things I want to talk about are the decals on this crate. Decals were an important part for me because I feel like the decals really show the scale and they really give it that sort of final touch that makes it look like an actual product or like an actual crate. Without the decals, this thing looks pretty bland, and it's also very hard to sell the scale without any decals or little recognizable elements that we as humans can see and be like, oh, that's what the scale this thing is supposed to be. Funnily enough, the decals were kind of one of the most annoying parts of this whole project. Not the designing of them or the application, that's actually super fun to do. But getting a sheet of custom water slide decals is a pain in the ass, especially if you want white. As you may know, normal printers don't have white ink, so it's very difficult to print water slide decals yourself. I actually ended up buying a printer that could print white toner, So I thought I could make my own water slide decals, but that horribly failed. So in the end, I just had to order it from some company, and that worked out great. And with that, I think that's kind of it. You know, it's funny. I really don't like YouTube videos where they do a lot of this snappy editing, where they cut out each breath to make it sort of super hip and snappy and whatever, cool, I guess. And I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna do this in one go, no cuts, and have none of that snappy editing stuff. But then through making this video, I realized I can't do that at all. I mean, basically, I mess up every other sentence. You have no idea what pain it's been to record this video. Anyway, unfortunately, there'll be some cuts in here. I can't help it. This is the best I can do for now. Hopefully it'll get better in the future. I mean, I'm planning on doing some more videos, so hopefully the talking gets easier. If you're interested, I'm also going to be posting a full process video of how I made this whole thing. I recorded every step. So I recorded the design process, I recorded the 3D printing, cleanup, painting, and applying decals. So if you're into that, check it out. And then that's it. Time to close this guy back up and go do something else. Bye.